Welcome to the DL, the podcast show that talks about everything to do with truck repair and diagnostics for the heavy truck and construction industry. I am your host, Tyler Robertson, CEO and founder of Diesel Laptops. Welcome to the DL. I'm your host, Tyler Robertson. This is the podcast series where we talk about everything to do with heavy truck and equipment diagnostics. And today we're actually going to talk about automotive a little bit as well. I have a special guest here all the way from Chicago, Illinois. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Matt, let's get some quick background on what you do, because I think you're the man of about 1 million jobs, is kind of what I learned here before we started recording this whole thing.
Yeah, I've always been very passionate about the industry, and I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV and stuff. I mean, really, my free time is spent with more stuff related to the industry. I've always enjoyed it. So I'm a full-time instructor for College DuPage in Glen Ellen, which is the west suburbs of Chicago. We have a pretty well-funded, very successful program. We have 5 now hiring 6 full-time faculty. We have a 29,000 square foot facility, and it is just an automotive program, but we do have a lot of students that, transition into diesel and heavy duty, and myself included, because I actually went to the College DuPage for automotive and was able to kind of get into diesel. And then I teach part-time for Southern Illinois University, and they have a bachelor's in automotive technology. And so their graduates get hired directly by all the OEMs out there. And so we have a Chicago campus, a weekend program. So, for kind of technicians making a transition away from being technicians, they can kind of take classes. It's about three weekends a month on average for about a year. And then they do some online classes to get their bachelor's degree. And then about 15 to 20 hours a week, I do some mobile diagnostics and programming. So shops will call me. I'll go in there and, diagnose the trucks or cars, do programming for them. So sometimes it's more of a tooling issue. Sometimes it's more of a technician issue. And so they'll call me based on that. And then on top of that, I do a lot of training, because I like to try to, all the stuff I've done creating content for the community college or for, all my case studies from fixing these cars in the field. I kind of collect all that and do training. So I do training for at independent shop events like Vision. I've done Vision. We've done the CAN conference in Illinois. I train for the Indiana EPA. And then I also do some training for companies that kind of go directly towards OEMs. I train a lot of OEM field service engineers and trainers. So.
Well, and you're actually here this week helping us with a special project that we know nothing about, but it's diagnostic related.
Yep.
So you want to talk a little bit about what we have going on there and kind of what that tool is and why people would use it? Talking about the PicoScope.
Yeah. So, in the automotive side of things, there's been a lot of technicians that use oscilloscopes, and one of the ones that's gained a lot of popularity is the PicoScope. And I myself have been a PicoScope user for over 12 years now. And, so before I started kind of doing some training for them, I was always a user of their products and a fan of their products. So it was kind of an easy way to kind of get involved with them. And so what we're doing is, kind of getting the HD market ready for some of the diagnostics we've done, because the oscilloscope essentially does one of 3 things for you. It can either take a job and create, change the efficiency of it. So now something that might have taken you 3 or 4 hours can be done in 15 minutes once you become efficient with it. It can do some things where basically you're just getting educated guesses and kind of make it much more accurate. So especially things like engine mechanical issues, where the only other alternative would be to tear the engine apart. So now you can do some engine mechanical testing in non-invasive ways. Or like your J1939 bus, there's just the tools that a lot of techs are using today just simply aren't fast enough to detect the types of issues and failures we're seeing. One of them that I actually saw was a a vehicle got quoted. It was a Detroit one box. The dealership said it needed a Detroit one box, and I think they quoted over $18,000.
Oh, those things are remarkably expensive. Yeah.
Because of course too, I mean, and I get it. They did all the temp sensors and knock sensors. None of that stuff's gonna come out in Chicagoland. So yeah, so they just wanted to get a second opinion, so they went to one of my customers, and I figured I'd go there, run a regen, see some temp inversion on a DPF or something, and say, yeah, it needs a DOC, because I said it was a bad DOC.
Yep.
And it was setting SCR efficiency codes. As I'm looking at some of the data, things looked kind of irregular. And so using a scope, I checked the data bus, and I saw some, the data bus was kind of corrupt. And what was happening is that temp sensor data was being skewed between the after treatment module on its way to the ECM. And it was erroneously flagging this SCR efficiency code. So the worst part is that $18,000 repair would not have fixed that truck. So we're seeing a lot of that. And I think the third advantage to an oscilloscope is the training benefits. So both in, there might be some things that I show in a class that I would kind of just outright say, hey, this is not something you're going to probably scope in the field, but now you can visually see what's going on here. Or training yourself. Sometimes you might, like I not too long ago I had like a Freightliner blower motor, and I'm trying to diagnose this blower motor. I couldn't figure out in the service information how the thing worked. The wiring diagram, you just got 6 wires going into a box. They don't tell you what's what.
Yeah.
So now with the scope, I can figure out, okay, well, this is a pulse width modulated signal from this module. This is a power feed. So you can kind of help yourself figure out how that circuit works. So now the next time I go to diagnose one, I might not need the scope, but because I know and understand how it works, but it was able to kind of show me what was going on and see the whole picture. So
going back to that $18,000 one box Detroit system, what did you actually find? Where was the problem? Do you remember where the problem was on that one?
So it was it ended up being a bad ground for the radar cruise display, not even the module, just the display on the 1939 bus, the little I can't remember if it was a Wabco or Bendix system, but just that little display, bad ground. And
that caused an emission system problem on the truck where a dealer wanted to spend $18,000 to replace it. So I mean, I worked in dealerships for a lot of years, and I was a service manager as well. And we were talking, off the air before this, because one of the interesting things you do is you're like the phone a friend when people need help.
Yeah.
And you're kind of talking how there's really like 3 different groups that you really see inside that when people call you. Can you talk a little bit about those groups and kind of what you see there?
Yeah. So, I kind of have 3 levels of customers, and I'm talking to a lot of mobile technicians, which is kind of becoming a growing field. I mean, there's very large companies. There's a company called Mobile Auto Solutions in Chicago, and now they've kind of gone into Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin. And, my friend Kevin, he's seen, he saw some growth just like you did, in crazy amounts of growth. I talked to him at 1.8 years ago. He was by himself, and now I think he's got over almost 30 employees these days or something like that. And, but no one's really doing it on the heavy duty side except me in the Chicagoland area that I know of. I mean, there's not a lot of guys doing it heavy duty, but in the automotive world, mobile diagnostics is becoming quite a common thing for shops to kind of utilize. And you got the 3 different customers. Some customers, they really have no intentions of maybe buying diagnostic tools or having diagnostic techs. These are sometimes some of your smaller shops too, where maybe it's just an owner and a helper, and they just, maybe just don't want to get all the training, or maybe are intimidated by it. At the same time, they don't want to do a disservice to their customers. So they know they can call me or a mobile tech. We can come out, do the diag for them. They get a slight markup on my costs, and then they also get the repair costs. So they're still making money. It's a successful business still. Not as successful as it could be, because they are still subletting things. They still have to, they're at the mercy of me being able to get there, things like that. But at least they're not doing a disservice to their customers by just putting parts on. The second shop is the ones that are, really doing a disservice to their customers, and really, in my opinion, probably shouldn't be in business. And as we, not only train technicians, we need to train consumers about what to look at in a shop. And these are the shops that, they just start throwing parts at vehicles. And so, usually they call me when they've reached their their dollar amount, their threshold.
Yep.
And and I go in, there's thousands of dollars of parts on the vehicle, and I just have to go find a broken wire or, simply, after treatment has been installed, and I got to find the coked up throttle body or something. So that, it's got thousands of dollars worth of parts on it. Needed a $2 can of carb cleaner to clean the throttle body that wasn't closing for a regen or something. And then the third shop, when I get calls from, some of my shops, I know that I need to block a pretty good set of time off, because these are shops that have good tools, good techs, good service information. They may have put one or two parts on the vehicle, but, lower risk parts, not ECMs and DOCs, things like, things that are probably maybe made a little bit of improvement in, things that get worn out, like, def dosers or something like that. They might have put a low cost part on based on some of the evidence they gathered, but they're not ready to just start putting, high cost parts on without making absolutely sure. So those are the ones that, I got to book some more time out. But seeing all these different shops has given me a perspective, because actually one of the programs too I teach, made at College DuPage, was automotive service management certificate. And, based on the need that I saw a lot of shops that you have really good technicians, they become shop owners, and being a good tech does not make you necessarily ready for being a shop owner. So I'm trying to help them with the business sense of it. But in terms of successful shops, that third shop is by far the most successful. They're the ones that have the happiest customers. They're the ones that are making the most money. Now, they've had a big investment to go with that on tools and training, but most of them would tell you that that's just, it's a tiny, tiny expense in the business compared to what they can make with it. So,
well, the way I look at it too, from the overall, 10,000 foot approach here is, the questions I always tell people: are trucks going to become more complicated or less complicated as time moves on, right? They're going to get more complicated, right? Are emission systems going to get more complicated, and is the government going to keep cracking down and asking them to do things? Absolutely. Now it's the new phase 2 stuff, and they have to meet certain mile per hour requirements, which means more technology going on in these vehicles. And you just start seeing all this stuff in these shops that are kind of stuck in that middle or that lower level. Those guys really have a decision to make. They have to decide, like, we're just going to do brakes and suspension and the 101 stuff.
But how do you do that though? Because I've even we've seen it happen on the car side, and we're going to see it happen on the truck side. You can't just be a mechanical tech anymore. Because I can't just say I'm an undercar tech, because, like, for instance, on the car side, and it's coming on the truck side too, and we see a lot of the same technologies. But I'm just going to be an undercar guy. I'm going to do brakes, ball joints, tires, and alignments. Well, tires have TPMS sensors. Basically, when you do an alignment, you have to do steering angle resets. Now you have to do ADAS resets. So brake systems have become very complex. Now you have to take a scan tool, retract calipers and stuff. So that's going to happen on the truck side too. And so you can't just be that to be that mechanical tech. Now you have to. You're going to be on electronic tools no matter what. So
you're absolutely right in that, because I got asked. It's just weird. I got asked to speak at 2 shows about a week apart from each other. And they're, Tyler, can you talk about diagnostic tools and ADAS? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I hang up the phone. I'm like, I know nothing about that. So I've been reading through service manuals. I've been reading through owner manuals. I've been watching manufacturer videos. I've actually gotten in contact with a couple of the people at these manufacturers and making the ADAS systems, mainly WAPCO and Bendix, the Wingman system. And
they're pretty good about giving out information.
Detroit's got their assurance system. But what I'm learning is astounding me. Like, I didn't realize with WAPCO, if you literally, they tell you in the manual, if you make an adjustment to your suspension or blow a tire out or replace a tire, there's some calibration commands you need to run in order to make sure that radar system's operating properly. And I think there's a lot of liability people can get themselves in if all of a sudden they go do suspension work, the system's not calibrated correctly for the radar and lane guidance and collision warning, and an accident happens. Yeah, you just got brought into a lawsuit and opened yourself up. Yeah. So it could get ugly pretty quick.
All of this is kind of in its infancy right now, and there is a lot of debate among some of the professionals about maybe what tools they're using and how how they document this procedure. But I really think that that's not going to be the stuff that gets people in the legal trouble. I think it's going to be like kind of like what more of you mentioned is they didn't do the procedure they should have done.
Yep.
Or, they did not make an attempt. That's more negligence than anything right there. They did not really make even an attempt to try to properly fix the system. So.
Yeah. I mean, I came from the dealership world, and I can tell you I was around when Volrad first came out from Eaton, and then the Bendix thing, and Wabco was gaining steam. And nobody from Bendix or Wabco or even International said, hey, there's some things you guys need to be aware of here when you're working on these trucks. So there's just a real lack of education out there. People don't know, even at the dealership level. I talked to another gentleman, Chris. He's actively involved with TMC and HD Repair Council. And he used to go send out these trucks that they'd fix from collisions and say, hey, you need to calibrate the radar or do this. And the dealer's like, why? They didn't even know. He's like, he'd actually have to go in the manual, highlight it, and take a picture and send it to him. And they just didn't know. So, there's a big push in the collision industry, at least, to try to start educating people on that side. But they're coming. I mean, in Europe, 2016, Europe made every single commercial truck from like a Sprinter van size and up to have required ADAS equipment on it. Volvo made it mandatory, or not mandatory. They made it a standard feature on their VN and VNL series last year. Doesn't mean the dealer can't take it off when they order the truck and save some money.
Yeah.
But it's coming.
You're coming here right. For sure, because basically by 2022, it's already going to be required on cars.
Yep.
So basically any vehicle you buy as a consumer in 2022 model year is going to have it. But a lot of your OEMs on the car side have already done it since 2017. Every Toyota's had it on there. So, if you have laws in place for the cars and stuff, I mean, people are going to expect this on trucks too. It's like, hey, wait a minute, this is on my car. How come this big, 80,000 pound truck doesn't have it that could, create a lot more damage? So, I
mean, you were talking about, how you can't just be a mechanical guy anymore. Another great example, the parking brake, the old, the mustard and ketchup valve on the dash, the air valve. I mean, I sat in a truck, and I believe I'm almost positive it was Bendix, and they have a digital one now. And they're trying to do things around safety. So, for example, with that system now, it's digital. It's not the push button anymore, the air system. It's actual buttons, electronic. You couldn't release the air brake unless your seatbelt was plugged in.
Yeah,
right?
I've found out the hard way in a couple. I'm like, why is this air brake not turning out? And some of them, so... and also in our, right when you go if you go into neutral, it automatically, sets the parking brake and stuff like that, especially on things like school buses or transportation buses. Yes, I've seen a lot of that now. I guess I could say one thing. It's still okay to be maybe a mechanical guy, technicians. There's still a need, but as a shop, you can't just be a mechanical shop. I guess is what I would probably say the most, because, and I think that maybe this is where our industry needs to kind of change, is we maybe kind of need to restructure a little bit as businesses. We're starting to see a lot of shops kind of do this, maybe not necessarily out of, strategic planning, but maybe just out of it just kind of fell that way and it works that way. But we see a lot of shops where they have a couple good diagnostic techs, and then you still have the mechanical guys, but they work all together.
Exactly. Yep.
So now you got a diagnostic tech that's gonna, maybe diagnose the system. Then that goes to the line tech, and they're gonna say, hey, by the way, when you get to this point, let me know, and then I can do the electronic part for you. And because what kind of happens is a lot of the guys that kind of maybe get into the diagnostics and electronics may not be the same guys that really like doing truck brakes and stuff like that. And then some guys just like to, so there is kind of there's still kind of where you kind of need, and it might be an experience level thing. It might just eventually be where as you're starting out, you're doing more of the mechanical stuff and then working with the diag tech. But, in this transition of the industry, we might end up seeing some techs just kind of, they got 10 years left working on trucks. Maybe they just stick with the mechanical and work with.
So let's talk about that. Say you're, you're in your young 20s, early 30s, you're a mechanical guy, or even, I guess age is kind of irrelevant here a little bit, but say you see like, hey, I want to get more, I need to learn more about how these systems work. I need access to information. I need training. I need these things. I know they call you and you do those things kind of around the Chicago area. And I know you travel a bit too, but the country's a pretty big place. There's a lot of shops out there. What do they do? What resources do they have that you know of to try to get there?
Yeah, there's a couple issues. It's a little bit light on the heavy duty side right now. I know you guys are making a lot of advancements on that side of it, but the biggest problem I see in training, so I've been doing, that instead of education more like college level and stuff. And then you got the training, working technicians. The biggest problem I see on the training side, with our industry having kind of really no requirements of initial education, I see a lack of foundation. So what the hardest thing is you might be best off. You really have to assess yourself as a technician.
Yeah. What
was my kind of initial training? You might be best off finding a place to take a basic electricity class, local community college or local training program, because I see a lot of people struggle with the training because they don't have that foundation. So it's a lot harder to understand, to learn a system. And when you start talking about maybe a parking brake, all right, here's the switch. This is how it operates. This switch is normally open. This one's normally closed. This one gets power. This is a switch ground. If you didn't have that foundation and understand all that, it's going to take you a lot longer to kind of pick that up in training. So I think that as a technician, if you want to, improve your skills, you kind of have to really be honest with yourself about what your skill level is at. You may not want to jump into a radar cruise class if you don't understand how to check powers and grounds to a module and stuff. So I guess that's the first step. And that's where I see a lot of technicians that lack that, formal training at the beginning of their career. And that's why I think the programs out there, like, what's the one you've been dealing with now? What's the one you've been involved with? Diesel training centers, right?
Oh, American Diesel Training Centers.
Without something like that as your starting point, it's going to be a lot harder. If you just kind of found your way to a shop after high school and kind of learned on the job, you're probably lacking that basic electricity foundation that you kind of need to kind of continue on.
So, what we see is, we used to call it basic electrical. Now we call it electrical 1 because we think the name basic was kind of hurting.
Yeah, I found that when you ever name something basic, people don't want it, but they need it. And then when you do something advanced, when you call it advanced, if it's truly advanced, they're going to be like, what is going on in this class? This class is too hard.
So you're absolutely right. We had this basic class and we would do a pretest, got there, right? Minute 1, bam, here's a pretest. Let's see what you guys know. No one ever passed it. And there's a lot of people that were coming in with 15, 20, 30 years experience, and they didn't know how to properly use a multimeter.
That goes back to being honest with yourself. That's why I say you got to be honest with yourself as a technician, what your skill level's at. Sometimes you may not know, but but I think that you really have to kind of, assess yourself and kind of think, where's my starting point here?
So on that note, I'll give a quick plug to a partner we work with. That's David Boyes at Today's Class. They have a mobile app where it asks you questions and all your technicians take it every day. It's like a 5-10 minute thing on the app. And the manager has a dashboard and it'll actually assess your skill level in your technicians for you. And help, they do things to help improve those scores. So it's a great entry level tool. Cause I think a lot of times even service managers don't know or they don't have a clear idea of what specific skill sets their own technicians have or don't have.
And that'd be a good service managers, doing that. That's the other thing we kind of see when you're talking about technicians wanting to get training and stuff. Actually, one of the biggest struggles we've seen, this is on the car side and the truck side, is and these are a lot of these managers are the ones that are complaining, technician shortage, or I can't fix this or that. They're not willing to invest the money or pay for training, and so we have a lot of technicians out there in the field right now. They want to learn. They want to learn. They are very passionate about this industry. They want to know more. These are not the clock punchers and stuff like that. Yep. But their employers are not giving them the tools they need to learn. Or they go to classes finally. They finally, go to classes sometimes at their own cost, and then they see certain tools like something like the PicoScope or something like some of these scan tools. Wow, we could, really use this tool to be more efficient. And then it's like constantly, this constant battle with their employer trying to convince them to purchase this equipment. And so I think that the management really needs to kind of really think about, training as just a normal thing. We're starting to see more and more shops say, if I want to be successful as a shop, I need to basically send every one of my employees to training. Yep. I need to make sure I'm constantly reevaluating my tools. And I've worked with a few shops, some of the customers, the better ones and stuff. And I've gotten them sending their technicians to certain training events. Yep. And I've gotten them buying certain tools. And they've never told me, Matt, that was a waste of money. They've always told me, Matt, holy cow. Last month was a good month because we finally, instead of spending 5 hours to diagnose this truck, now it's 1. We got a happier customer, and we have a, we can still charge, the other places maybe are charging. That's where we kind of, if you can send a tech to training, get them more efficient. You buy a tool, it makes you more efficient. Now a job that takes 3 hours is taking 1. You can still charge for 3. Some people get worried about that. But it's like, wait a minute. When you got better at doing a brake job, you didn't charge less for it.
I mean, you invested in the time to learn it, and you invested in the resources you need in order to do that job in 1 hour instead of 3.
If you buy a special tool that makes you install a part faster, you don't charge less. You charge more. You have to recover the cost of the tool. So, and then also just that customer satisfaction piece is, the last shop I worked at's now been in business over 40 years. You don't get to that point by being parts changers or just guessing. You get to that point by fixing the vehicle right the first time.
Yeah. So, what got Diesel Laptops here originally was just selling a diagnostic tool. And it's almost like a specialty tool, like something the Tiger tool makes, or it's a specialty suspension tool. It just happens diagnostics got really popular really quick with everything going on. But I think what we've learned now that's not enough. They need training classes both on the tool. And we found they need training classes on how to properly troubleshoot after treatment, how to properly do electrical diagnostics. And we're launching more classes around those things. We also learned they need repair information, because you can have a great diagnostic tool that shows you a code, but if you don't understand what that circuit is, how it's wired in the truck, where it's going, what components are involved, it's really difficult to do. So we obviously build those things as well. And the fourth piece of the puzzle that kind of fits into all this, at the end of the day, there's usually a part to replace.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we get people, from all these, I got this issue, to here's the part you need to buy efficiently as possible? And that's a lot of the solutions we create here. And when we started the training classes for diesel techs, I was absolutely amazed. When we launch a new course, we usually email our entire database. And if it's not full within the first 24 hours, it's usually a rare thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're absolutely right. People are begging for that. And there's, I know we do like kind of the continuing education. You have the community colleges and Tim Spurlock and American Diesel Training Centers doing the entry level stuff. There's not a lot of other people like Diesel Laptops that's offering aftermarket generalized training on specific systems. You'll get Eaton doing their classes and Cummins doing their classes. But those are expensive and usually really hard for, Joe Public to go to those things. The dealers usually kind of gobble all that up.
Or the free ones aren't that in depth. I went to a Cummins one recently, and I mean, the guys were great. I was able to pick their brain, but it was like 2 hours long.
2 hours, some pizza, and yeah.
I think Bendix is one example of someone that's done very well. I think Bendix has some good training and stuff, but they're the rarity in our industry, right?
Yep.
So free service information, free scan tool, and support, but that's kind of the oddball in our industry. I think that. My perspective is interesting. I've been working on the light duty and the heavy duty side, and it seems like everything diagnostic wise has always taken twice as long in the heavy duty side. So for instance, the network issue on that truck, I think I had probably 16 hours in that truck. It probably would have taken 8 on a car for the same issue.
Yep.
To kind of, but with the truck side, dealing with different service information, all the different possibilities. You got a truck that could have 15 different transmissions in it. So which one is it on the wiring diagram and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I've always been frustrated on the truck side, because on the car side, you can get, for the longest time, this changed now. You could get good aftermarket tools at a good starting point. There was good aftermarket service information. There was a lot of good OEM and aftermarket training. Basically any month I could go to a conference and get training. Yep. Any given time I can subscribe and pay for OEM training. I can pay for OEM service information on a short-term basis. I got a vehicle beat me up, $10. I can go buy a Honda subscription and have the same thing the dealer has. That's never been the case for the heavy duty market. And you had to have OEM scan tools. I basically, when I first started out, that's all I had was OEM scan
one of
tools.
Each.
Yeah, and so I mean, and I was actually kind of talking to Dustin about this the other day. I'm like, it's crazy. I was like kind of sitting back. I'm like, I have like, I think over like 50 different software programs or tools that I have to update all the time. It's crazy sometimes. But that was all I had was the OEM scan tools. And now, I tried some of the aftermarkets and they were all just very disappointing. But now I bought a Texa about I think almost a year ago now, and it's actually pretty impressive what it can do. You know, the amount of stuff you can do with that tool, it's definitely come a long way. That aftermarket tool.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem in the HD world too. Is it's just too expensive to buy all the OEM software and OEM repair information. So, did you ever read through the HD memorandum of understanding that got signed a couple years ago between the OEMs and the aftermarket people?
I read some pieces. I know that kind of NASTIF's still trying to kind of go after them a little bit on some things, and they're, from what I can see, they're out of compliance for the most part.
Yes. So I mean, I obviously follow that closely, but in there it specifically details out, hey, OEMs, you need to provide this information to the public at a fair and reasonable price. And that includes diagnostics software, that includes repair information. And the crazy thing here is fair and reasonable is really subjective. So, Cummins, for example, I mean, you can go on QuickServe, you can go on for free, right? And put 5 serial numbers in there. And yeah, they're going to charge you some money if you want unlimited lookups. And it's not cheap. I think it's still like $1,200 for a year for Cummins. But then you go look at someone and their software, their diagnostic software, somewhere in that, $600 to $1,200, depending on what part of the country you're in to buy their software. But then you look at someone like Hino. Hino has hardly any trucks. And they say, oh, our software is $2,400 for a 12-month license.
Which is surprising because Toyota is probably the most aftermarket friendly company.
Yeah.
For $1,000, I can use a J2534 device, have their factory scan tool and their factory service information and ECM reflashing for all modules for $1,000 a year. Yep. Or they allow short term to do the same thing.
Yep. Oh yeah, you can buy.
Hino's the exact opposite. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, automotive industry. You hit on earlier. You can buy 1-day passes, 3-day passes, 1-year passes, and they are reasonably priced.
Well, and Navistar has gotten into compliance, I think, because I recently saw on the website they did offer a short term subscription, I think, to service information now, but it was like ridiculous. It was like half of the yearly cost. You know, something stupid.
They're still like $500 for a month subscription. You're kind of like, what?
But I think that's how they're saying, oh, we're in compliance with the memorandum, with the MOU now. So, I mean,
So there's a lot of work to be done there. And, I'm really torn on it because on one hand, the harder OEMs make it for people to get that stuff, the better off diesel laptops is because we sell the aftermarket stuff. But on the other hand, I want people to fix trucks efficiently and do that. So we do support everything those guys are doing. At the end of the day, if the world's a better place because you have access to repair information and diagnostic tools and those resources, I mean, that's really what's important.
I think that the ultimate solution, the ideal solution for every shop would be you buy a tool like Kajali or Texa. You have that as your main tool. If there's something in there you can't get done, maybe you have a short-term subscription then.
Yeah.
And so, if the OEs did have a short-term subscription, I think if anything, it would maybe make you even that much better because there's still a lot of guys that still have OEM. They might just work on a handful and they still have OEMs. But now they might say, I'm just going to have one subscription per year, one tool to update, and then maybe get those as needed on a short term. Because if it was $100, maybe I'm working on a Detroit diesel. I can't do what I need to with the Texan. I'll pay my $100. I'll get the Detroit for 3 days or something
to get the truck done.
Truck done.
So we did launch kind of silently a program here. So we actually have these suitcases that are the carry cases, and in each side one's a specialized dealer level tool. So we have the Detroit, for example. We have a kit that you can rent. We call them RPKs, or remote programming kits. And they're pro level, dealer level. So what we'll do is the customer will pay a fee. We charge $300 and we send that tool out to the customer. Then our employees here, our technicians here, remote into the kit, do the programming event or whatever needs to be done. And then we lock it down and we have UPS pick it up and bring it back.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do that to help you because you're right. You can never have all the tools for everything, but you at least need to have options out there to fix things.
Yeah. And as a shop, you make sure read the service information before you get into repairs, because good example is you don't want to have to be buying that kit when the truck was promised at a certain time and you didn't quote it. That's what I deal with that as a mobile tech all the time is, sometimes you're getting called and it's almost like customers paying out of their pocket at this point because they didn't misquote the vehicle. They didn't think it might need to be reflashed or coded or whatever. So, but that's a great service because Chicagoland is very densely populated. We have a lot of mobile techs. but that's not the case when you're in a rural area
Yeah.
or, maybe the tech doesn't have that type of tool.
I mean, I've never even heard of one in Columbia, South Carolina, right? And we're the capital of South Carolina. So, yeah, I have heard in the more densely cities. I've heard of it in Philadelphia, now Chicago. So it sounds like a valuable service for a lot of people. So let's touch on one last thing, and that's oscilloscopes again. All right. So, what I don't know much about oscilloscopes, right? I know what I've looked, I've seen them and used, I've watched some videos, I've talked to you a bit about them and our guys downstairs. And it appears to me this is not one of those tools where you can just buy it and hand it to somebody and they're going to have any idea on what to do with it.
Yeah. It's a tool that's going to take a little bit of training. And it can be intimidating at first, but I was working with your team this week, and all of a sudden they're like, "Wow, that's a lot easier than I thought." Because on one hand, it's basically a DSO with just graphing voltage over time. So if you're using a meter already and you feel confident in a meter, guess what? All you're doing is just graphing it out now. So there's different levels of tests you can do. So what we're doing right now is we're kind of developing some of the more basic tests. We're looking at what are like the main tests that are going to really quickly increase your efficiency, or basically something you couldn't do. Like, what are the main issues we're seeing that you could not accurately do without the oscilloscope? So we're kind of starting there, but it's a tool that's going to be a lifelong learning because, I do work for the company and been using it for over 12 years, and I still learn stuff every day. And so you're constantly going to be, getting more efficient, learning new tests. But it doesn't take very long. It doesn't take much training to get a basic understanding and get a basic, basic skill set enough to do some tests. Now, the other great thing about it in the digital world is, you can essentially save, instead of just screenshots, you can save raw data files to be shared in communities. So now you can say, well, I captured the data, but I'm not sure how to analyze it.
Yep.
Well, you post it online. You can post it on a forum. And people can download and then actually look at the raw data rather than just a screenshot, and they can manipulate it how they would prefer to, and then kind of help everyone out. So it's one of those things where between maybe like technical support or forums and things of that nature, that we can get the vehicles fixed together rather than, individually. And that's what's most important today is networking with people. That shop down the street's no longer your competitor. They need to be your friend. You need to kind of work together and stuff to get these vehicles fixed. So
I mean, we've been talking a long time about doing business with PicoScope, and I think we're almost there. We haven't done it yet, but I think that thing's going to happen. But I know what we realized real quick was we need to do exactly what you're talking about. We need to make sure we have training available for these people. We saw it on the diagnostic tool end when we were selling those high-end diagnostic kits, and people would get them if they don't have training and they didn't call in for tech support. They hated the tool and they thought it was worthless. Yeah, right?
I think text is a good example of that because the user interface is probably not the most friendly in the world, but once you figure out its quirks, it's pretty impressive what you can do with it for an aftermarket scan tool.
So I mentioned this on another podcast, but the story with me is when I first got Texa, they told me how great it was. I'm like, yeah. So I get out there and I spent a couple hours at a shop and I could not connect to anything at all. And I called the guy back up swearing at him like, you lied to me, this thing's horrible, and, send it back. And he talked me off a ledge and said, hey, go back out there, but let's walk through it and talk about it. And when I get out there, once I learned those quirks, I was like, holy crap, this thing is absolutely amazing. There's no other tool like this on the market. But, and I have customers that experience that every week. They get it and they're just confused. They don't know what to do. But once they take the time to learn it, it becomes a better tool. And it sounds like the oscilloscopes are right there with it as well. And I think you're right on the community side of it as well. That's partly why we launched a forum on our website. We fully understand these people want to interact with us through the phone, on websites, and mobile app stuff's coming as well. And it's really going to take all those pieces in order to really sell that tool, because it's not really known very well in the HD industry. Automotive, you guys have been dealing with it for a while. It's really starting to take off in that industry.
Pretty much. Well, and for a while it was more of an independent shop thing, which in the independent shop, your lack of access to some of the resources that a dealer might have is going to maybe push your need. And then also too, I mean, if you look at a lot of your OEM service procedures, those were kind of written while vehicles are under warranty. Yep. The idea would be, we want to kind of narrow down the amount of diagnostic time, and they basically have a threshold of parts that it's okay to toss at the vehicle because they save money on the diag time. And so when you're building your shop on your name, on your reputation, you're aiming for 100% accuracy, right?
Yeah.
Not like whatever the actuaries figured out at the manufacturer. So that's where we've kind of stepped up our game with the oscilloscope, is kind of fill in the gaps or to become more accurate or become more efficient. If I can, check the compression of an engine in 10 minutes instead of 3 hours, that's going to, make me more efficient, more accurate. And then the heavy duty side, well, I guess going back to the cars, virtually almost every single OEM, either now or within the next couple of years, is going to have an oscilloscope at the dealers now. It's not just a field service engineer tool.
So funny story on that. My trainers, two of them worked at the international dealership. And when you had a real big problem with something, mainly had to do with the cylinder performance on some of those Max Force engines, they'd send you a tool. They'd say specifically, put this here and that there, and hit this button on the software, and then send us the file.
They didn't realize they were using an oscilloscope.
They were using an oscilloscope. So once our guys started getting in, like, oh my God, this is exactly what we were doing there. They just weren't letting us.
CPA is an oscilloscope, man.
Yep, the cylinder performance analyzer. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Some OEMs that's their strategy. They're still going to do that. But some OEMs have been doing some pretty intensive training and letting the techs kind of do it, because, at the end of the day, these OEMs are hurting for, just like some shops are hurting for techs, the OEMs are hurting for field service engineers. They're hurting for the behind the scenes people in Detroit or whatever else. So they're going to have to train the techs in the field to do it too.
Well, I think you're right, because the story used to be with truck sales manufacturers was all about features and benefits and miles per gallon and all these things. Now they're all talking uptime and getting our truck back on the road quicker and preventive repairs and all these other things to keep that truck going longer. And having the technicians trained with the right tools at the shops is part of that equation for those guys. So 100% agree with you on that. So let me ask you a question about oscilloscope.
One more. We're quitting the HD manufacturers. Pico is actually a supplier now for a couple of different heavy off-road, off-highway and on-highway OEMs. And so they're using the Pico products as a dealer tool. So now, just like you sell a lot of different dealer level tools, you're buying a dealer level tool when you buy the Pico, because they're using it at the at the OEMs now, because they've all realized we can't fix these bus issues or mechanical issues without it. So
say you have a technician, he's comfortable using a multimeter and electrical knowledge, and you hand him an oscilloscope and you give him some training. What's the learning curve? Is he good to go after a couple hours, or is it weeks before he knows the basics, or what would you expect there from someone?
After just a couple hour crash course on Monday, I had some of your employees getting waveforms on their own. I came in this morning. That was with my guidance, right?
Yeah.
I was still there, but I came in this morning and they got the same waveforms on their own. So, it wasn't a matter of, like we had to do a 1 month intensive training. And so you'll be able to get, we're kind of, for, the diesel laptops rollout, we're kind of creating a handful of tests that are the most common tests, or really the ones that are really going to save you that time or make you more accurate. And they're not going to take a long time to figure out. And there's always going to be, there's a huge support group and process. There's a lot of training on the internet already. We're going to have some training, and there's going to be support. You're not going to be alone. Especially when you get on the forum. And that's one thing. Once people start getting this tool in their hand and using it, they get excited, and it's really the thing that kind of fuels passion in the career, that challenge.
Yeah.
If the day that you know every single vehicle and it's easy to diagnose and stuff, that's when people are like, I'm not like really enjoying my job too much anymore. I like to have the challenge.
I tell you what, man, if I owned a repair shop and I see where all this is going with the high tech stuff and electrical and alternative, fuel sources and all that stuff, if you're an independent shop owner or a guy that wants to own it one day, the more you can learn now and get ahead of it, they're setting themselves up for a long time. Because I think we talked about earlier, like that kind of that first tier and that middle tier guy, if they're just living solely off that mechanical stuff, their customers aren't going to want to go to two different shops to get the same thing done, right? Eventually, those guys that are winning and figuring it out and can do the diagnostics and do them efficiently and correctly, those are the guys that win long-term when you look 10, 15, 20 years on the road.
And the business consulting side of me is the last thing you ever want to do is send your customer to another shop, let them get another experience, right?
Yep, exactly.
They're like, wait a minute, Matt's waiting room doesn't have this fancy coffee. And stuff. So it might be something very arbitrary that the customer never comes back for, or maybe lose confidence, or all of a sudden, basically, how it is. Certain things are very subjective in what we might recommend. If a kingpin's loose, it's loose.
Yep.
If you have a pretty loose kingpin and you have 100 techs look at it, they're all going to recommend a kingpin. But there might be some things that, is kind of in that gray area, maybe brake linings or something like that. What you don't want to do is have a customer go to shop and they recommend a bunch of stuff that, and probably maybe the vehicle doesn't necessarily need, but then the customer loses confidence, like, wow, Matt missed all that stuff.
Yeah.
Or they go to that shop and, oh, you don't need any of that. Matt was wrong.
Yep.
And so you don't want to do that. You don't want them getting another experience. You don't want to lose that customer. So essentially, if you think about how much you could get off of one truck in its lifetime, if you lose one truck, I guarantee you it's you're losing out on a lot more revenue than what a tool would have cost you or what it costs to send all your techs to some training, right? So it stacks up pretty quick when you keep losing trucks.
I 100% agree with you. So Matt, if someone wants to get a hold of you, whether it's a training class or having the Chicagoland to come out there or ask you to speak somewhere, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn or I'll put my email. It's mshanahan0718@yahoo.com. Just let me know. And I'd be more than happy to help you out with some either training or diagnostics. I love talking industry stuff.
Hey, I talk to people all the time, especially on the technical side. I can definitely say you're well ahead of the curve of most other people out there. And I really appreciate what you're doing for the industry with the training classes and trying to advance the cause and everything. So
don't let it fool you though, because I get beat up all the time on trucks. And so that's another thing. You just gotta be modest in this area and just understand that, these trucks are gonna be sometimes hard to fix. And just, be patient and stick with it. So yeah, it may seem like I know a lot, but trust me, you see me in a shop, it doesn't just come. I don't just show up to a truck and I'll be like, magic wand, here's what it is. It takes a lot.
I've been doing this diagnostic thing now for 5 years full time and before that, and I still learn new stuff on the diagnostic side. So yeah man, it's a big world out there. But again, I really appreciate coming on the show and everything and talking to everyone. Again, Matt Shanahan here on the DL with Tyler Robertson. Have a great day, Matt.
Thanks.
Look forward to working with you guys and over at Pico. And I think we got a long future ahead of us.
Yep.
Awesome, man. Thank you much.